So now we're on step 3, strategies. Planning means developing strategies to overcome obstacles that may arise and to deliver the right message in the best way to the target groups. To do this, we need to answer the questions: what, where, when, who, and how. So let's start with what. What are the things that will get in the way of reaching your objective? Money, time, physical surroundings, personal biases, fear, organized opposition, not knowing enough about your target groups. What can you do to overcome these obstacles and reach your targets with messages that are going to matter to them? Personal biases can be one obstacle or impediment. Our biases of them and their biases toward us. Now, we tend in library culture to see this stereotyping issue as they're having stereotypes of us. And yes, we do have a legacy of stereotyping to deal with. But this may have blinded us to an equally powerful and damaging barrier, which is our stereotypes of them. What kind of advocacy do we exercise when we characterize them simply as irrational, ignorant, unfair budget cutters? What kind of advocacy do we exercise when we characterize opponents as somehow inherently evil? Just ask yourself how effective people are at persuading you when they sound angry or whiny or insulting. The language can also get in the way. People might not think that story time for children is essential, but they do care about reading readiness for children. Or students might dismiss information literacy as a fancy phrase, but they do understand and care about saving time, and they care about getting higher grades. We need to use terms and concepts that are important to our hearers. The environment will likely hold many obstacles. The community may be strapped for money. There may have been a damaging story online or in the local newspaper. There could be other groups vying for the same money who are very persuasive. It takes research and talking and judgment to identify these obstacles. But if we do this work thoroughly, we will be much better able to present the case for the library in a competitive environment. This thinking through of obstacles must be done for each and every target group. Where's the most important place for you to communicate with your target audience? Well, plan on going to where they are. This is where they are comfortable and where they feel in control of things. It's also a sign of respect. When's the best time for you to meet with your target group? Well, when they can and according to their constraints. This means you have to be prepared to cover in 10 minutes what you were hoping to be able to deal with in 20 minutes. Timing also includes considering election and budget cycles when your targets are elected people or senior bureaucrats. The lead time, for example, on budget preparation is very long, and you need to know how to time your issue so that you get in at the right points in that cycle, whether it's multi-month or multi-year. Who? Well, who should be the spokesperson? Your best messenger is the one who is the most credible to the target of your message. In other words, not always you. It goes without saying that this person should be an excellent presenter, should be comfortable in that presenter role, should be very well prepared. Based on the research that we've seen in this course, actually, it is ideally someone who is already connected, directly or indirectly, in a positive relationship with the target. How? Well, we've talked in this course about the telling of the story. The message has to be short and simple in order to be striking and to be memorable. But most of all, it has to be relevant to the person who's receiving that message. This last requirement, the requirement of relevance, is the usual stumbling block in library advocacy because we keep talking in terms of what we love and value, whereas people pay attention to the things that they love and value. So take the time to create sound bites and messages that meet these requirements. So what works in influencing other people? Well, first, creating a common agenda. Find the links between what you, the advocates, have to offer and what the target group values. Fortunately, there are few issues in society, in universities, in schools, and so on, for which libraries do not have some clear usefulness and benefit and relevance. Second, have credible and reliable information on the issue. In fact, research indicates that legislators, for example, find advocates and lobbyists to be among their most important sources of information. And third, solve their problem. Position your library or your project or your cause as a solution to a problem they have. And that brings us to step 4, communications. Given these decisions about objective and targets and strategies, what communication tools are going to be the most appropriate? Personal meetings, mail campaigns, social media, delegations? There are many options. Many make the mistake of choosing the communication tools too soon. It's only after we've considered our objectives and our targets, budget, timing, location, choice of messenger, choice of message, that we're able to choose the best match between audience and communication tool. Most effective communication tools are still those where one person talks to another. So they are one-on-one meetings, phone calls, group meetings, public meetings, and word of mouth. These personal meetings allow for interaction and furthering the development of a relationship. This is often manageable for us if we have refined our target group to a small number. Personal meetings are in fact key at every level, from the small local community or within the one institution, right out to the international level. In one of this week's guest interviews, you will hear how Victoria Owen of the University of Toronto, Scarborough, works through personal conversations, among other things, to advance the public interest in international agreements on copyright. Victoria chairs the Copyright and Other Legal Matters Committee of the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, or IFLA, which is very active on that front. Mass communication tools often cost money to create and distribute, and they're not always effective for small target groups. We use them perhaps to encourage others to advocate for our cause. The internet, especially email and Facebook and other social media, provide cheap mass mailing, but we can't always assume that unsolicited mass electronic letters are read any more than unsolicited mass paper letters. And of course, with email, people can filter those directly into the trash. However, the internet has been an essential tool for advocates who are objecting to, for example, international treaties related to intellectual property, or on a national level, government proposals about regulating digital copyright or protecting privacy. We are really in the early days still of digital advocacy movements, and we are not yet able to assess them thoroughly because we just don't have all that research. But we're going to be examining this issue of advocacy more thoroughly next week. Petitions, we do know, aren't very effective. Political decision makers are not traditionally impressed by them, unless the numbers are just simply overwhelmingly large. Also, we don't have evidence that political decision makers find online petitions more credible than traditional petitions. By and large, they see all forms of petitions as, well, pretty easy to sign and subject to a certain amount of social pressure. So if we ask them to put a lot of trust in something that takes less than a second to support, we may not be very effective. The real value of petitions is probably in creating greater awareness among advocates and potential advocates. Letters, still one of the most important modes of communication. That individually addressed and signed personal letter is spoken of by most elected people as the gold standard in advocacy communication with them. Showing appreciation is an underrated part of advocacy. Don't pass up opportunities to do it. Invite decision makers to events where they can be recognized and appreciated. Send them thank you letters for every meeting. Take photographs and give them to your decision makers afterwards. And mention their contributions at your events. Most decision makers have received as many shocked and appalled letters as their garbage cans can hold. They do not, in the main, get letters of thanks. Building strategic relationships is critical to communications. I can't overstate this. Advocacy is about relationship building. And as Ken Haycock notes, this is like having a bank account. You have to make those deposits before you are in a position to claim the withdrawals. And remember also that advocacy is not an emergency response system or a protest system, but a planned and deliberate and sustained effort over time. So make those investments in building relationships with your decision makers, whoever they are, politicians, chief librarians, committee chairs in a university, leaders of community groups, or school principals. Do initial and continual briefings based always on what you know to be their interests and priorities and their accountability, and not your interests and priorities. Do the same thing to engage the support of people who influence decision makers, and identify people who might wish to be partners in a coalition. We're going to look at coalition building in week 6. Advocacy is about respect. As you have gathered, none of this is really rocket science. And it recalls those lines that, everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten. But most leaders will tell you that respect is not what they receive from most earnest advocates. I was once leading an advocacy workshop at a very difficult time with a group of discouraged and angry library advocates. And we were supposed to list during the workshop those things that we respected about our decision makers. And the group was silent and disengaged from even the thought of respect. In the end, we had only one word on that flip chart. And that word was power. If you do not respect another thing, at least respect the power of your decision makers to make the decision that you want. Use their terms, use their language, make some connections between your issue and their priorities that positions you as useful and helpful in advancing that priority. Regardless of your modes of communication, the acronym to remember is BASIC. B-A-S-I-C. Brief, appreciative, specific, informative, and courteous. You can use that as a checklist before finalizing your communication plan and before sending any communications to decision makers. Hugh Williams speaks about strategic communications and various approaches in his video interview in this week. You may also want to review his interview in week 3, in which he describes principles of advocacy through associations. And that brings us to step 5, evaluation. How will you know that you have achieved your objective? You have to decide at the beginning how you're going to evaluate. Otherwise, you're not going to know how you're doing or to what degree you have met your objective. Although you're going to need to adjust as you go along, establishing the measures of evaluation in advance is going to assist you in that all-important work of refining and clarifying your objectives as you need to, as experience dictates. So look at your objectives and decide now how you are going to evaluate the progress of your advocacy implementation. Some of these evaluation criteria may be measured in numbers. Other criteria may be related to personal reactions, such as, for example, the apparent interest of the decision makers at a meeting that you had with them. Don't expect the decision makers, by the way, to commit on the spot, but you can pick up very important clues from the type of questions they ask, from the follow-up to which they commit, or from the referrals that they give to you. And finally, this may look like tic-tac-toe, but every situation is unique, and there are many opportunities in advocacy to engage coalitions and alliances in your cause, to develop grassroots support as an integral part of your strategy, to organize delegations, and to deploy specialized communication tools such as highly targeted social media. Next week, we're going to examine these and other special topics, and we'll wrap up the course. Bye for now.